I'm Allison Cruz here in Amelia County in Jetersville, and I'm for the soil.
Welcome to another episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii. Today we'll be talking about the big picture of soil health. Our special guest will be Chris Lawrence, State Cropland Agronomist with the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, and Eric Benfelt, who's an Extension Specialist for Community Viability with Virginia Cooperative Extension. We'll also cover the 4 core principles of soil health, as well as the importance of taking a pledge to improve your own soil health. Let's go to the show. Well, welcome everyone to episode number 2 of For the Soil, a Conversation. Eric and Chris, how you guys doing today?
Doing well. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, great to be here, Jeff. Thank you.
I understand the two of you have worked together for a number of years with Virginia Cooperative Extension. Eric, why don't you tell us about your background, and then Chris, your background?
Sure, Jeff. I actually went to Virginia Tech from 1995 to 1999 and studied crop and soil environmental sciences as well as forest soils. And then in the fall of 1999, I accepted a job with Virginia Cooperative Extension as a environmental science extension agent in Rockingham County, working generally in the central Shenandoah Valley, and have since continued to work with Virginia Cooperative Extension the past 16 years on environmental issues as well as community food system issues.
And Chris Lawrence with NRCS, give us your background.
Well, my background overlaps a lot with Eric since we earned our master's degrees from Virginia Tech around the same time, and I studied crop and soil environmental sciences there. And I worked with Eric as an extension agent for 5 years, but for the past 17 years, I've been the cropland agronomist with NRCS. And in terms of my personal background, my farm background comes from Europe. My mom grew up on a farm in Switzerland, and the French-speaking part of Switzerland, that's where I lived when I was a kid. Also had a chance to spend a lot of summers there and some years of my life. And so my inspiration for agriculture comes from there and was transplanted to Virginia.
Isn't that interesting? Eric, I believe your family's history is in Germany, and my family's history is in Switzerland and Germany.
Yes, that's correct.
Wow. How about the small world? Wouldn't it be something for our ancestors from 4 or 5 generations ago could listen to us talking today about soil? Of course, they could probably teach us a thing or two about soil health. Of course, back in those days, you had to know how to grow food for your own survivability. Eric, our big picture topic today is literally the big picture of soil health. So go ahead and take the lead, and let's do this podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. With this podcast, For the Soil, a Conversation, really want to talk with leaders in the field as well as farmers that have been working the land and taking care of the soil. So really pleased to have Chris as part of this conversation. And Chris, you've mentioned that you've worked with the Natural Resources Conservation Service for 17 years. For maybe people that aren't familiar with that agency, if you could give a little bit of background and history and how it pertains to soil.
Yeah, so the Natural Resources Conservation Service is one of the branches of U.S. Department of Agriculture, and it was founded in 1935 in the Dust Bowl period. Actually was called the Soil Conservation Service at the time, so it gives you an idea of our focus has always been the soil. Now, over the years, our focus and interest on protecting natural resources has expanded, right, to cover many other things of water quality, wildlife. But taking care of the soil as a foundational core resource on which not just agriculture, but actually our entire society depends, it remains a key aspect of NRCS. And so we work with private landowners and farmers across the country A slogan for NRCS is helping people help the land. And my particular job with NRCS is focused on soil management and taking care of soil, especially in the cropland context here in Virginia.
And Chris, I know you have an undergraduate degree in history, and I also have a degree in history from James Madison University. How did you actually come about working and taking an interest in soil?
Yeah, well, you've revealed a little secret about my past, that I studied history as an undergrad. You know, my love of agriculture and soil came from my family experience on my grandfather's farm. But, my academic interest in history, I pursued that for a while. And, the incredible overlap lies in the fact that we really should take a historical view of soil management and learn from the past. I like to say that the soil has a long memory, and we easily forget, when we drive by a field that's covered in green grass, we easily forget that field may carry the scars of how that soil was managed for centuries before, and we see that all over Virginia. So if I could just, add that one of my favorite books on soil is Dirt, The Erosion of Civilizations, and it's written by a fellow named David Montgomery. And his idea, and it's actually a point that led to if I could say that his key idea is that humans have underestimated the importance of soil and mismanaged soil since the dawn of civilization and agriculture. So we've got to take better care of our soils if we want to support our civilizations going forward.
Thank you, Chris. And within that, this idea for the soil, we want people to just appreciate the resource that it is and how critical it is to life, to air, to water quality, to food production. And Chris, you were very instrumental in initiating the Virginia Soil Health Coalition, as well as working to distill 4 core soil health principles that have been promoted and over the past 8 or so years. If you could speak a little bit about that, and I know you also take a great interest in human health as well.
Yeah, so I love to use an analogy of the soil as being a partner or an employee who actually works for not just farmers, but really all of us. This wonderful employee will work for free, but they do need room and board, if you will. They need us to manage them well, provide food, shelter, clothing, rest. So think of the soil as an employee. And, if I could just highlight this idea that what most people over centuries, the way we've managed the soil is essentially to extract everything we can from that employee, to work them almost to death and not give enough rest, not give back enough. And when you do that, you can get a lot of short-term benefits, but you sacrifice longer-term performance. So if we think of the soil as a partner or employee who will work for us for free, but we have to take care of them, we have to take care of that employee's health, then we start talking, we have a really good analogy with human health, which is something all of us can relate to. And so the next question is, well, how do you take care of your health or an employee's health? Well, we have general principles, right? For humans, it might be drink a lot of water, proper nutrition, not too much and certainly, not too little of the right things, get enough sleep, get up and move around every day. We were meant to move. Human beings were meant to move. So we can take that kind of approach in defining principles for taking care of the soil.
Soil is a living ecosystem and is a farmer's most precious asset. A farmer's productive capacity is directly related to the health of his or her soil. Howard Warren Buffett.
You've really worked through the years to distill this key message and these key principles down to 4 principles: minimize soil disturbance, maximize living roots, energize with diversity, and keep the soil covered. And as you know, that each farm is different, and so we also have to take it into context and values. But those are 4 principles that people can really adapt and implement on their farms and in their operations.
One of the things that we have come to understand is that soil science is very intimidating, and it can be complicated. You and I both have master's degrees in that subject, but the truth is that we need to distill our messages down to the simplest form. And it really starts with what you called our 4th principle, but is really our first priority: keeping the soil covered. And the soil needs to be covered in order to prevent it from washing and blowing away to begin with. You can't have a healthy soil if you don't have soil at all. And so the first step in rebuilding our soil and its ability to provide food with lower inputs, to grow healthy plants with a minimum of fertilizer and so forth, is to keep it covered. And then we move on to the idea that soil was not meant to be put through a blender. A traditional approach to managing soil is to pulverize it, leave it bare, take pretty much everything it produces, but we have to give back. And so that's the idea of keeping the soil covered and minimizing disturbance.
And could you say a little bit more about, maximizing living roots as well as energizing with diversity? Because I think for me, diversity includes, the crop rotations, livestock, and, certainly insects and microbes that are so inherently important to the soil ecosystem.
So, we've got a lot we can learn from our forefathers, as Jeff said, about soil management. But one of the things we now better understand is just how important the living fraction of the soil is, the living fraction of soil organic matter. So any gardener, farmer knows that soil organic matter is really important. It's what makes dirt into soil. It's what differentiates topsoil, darker, more friable, crumbly topsoil from subsoil. But it's that living fraction that's so important. And one of the things we now better understand, science is helping us understand that, the way we feed the soil is not just by applying compost or manure or organic matter to the surface, but those living roots of plants actually pump out food for microorganisms that live in association with crop roots. There's a very, very sophisticated symbiotic relationship between the life in the soil and plants. And so if we can keep living roots in that soil as much as possible throughout the year, keep something growing, that is an important way to feed the soil.
Gentlemen, I hate to jump in here, but we've only got a couple of minutes remaining in the podcast today. And I wanted to, first of all, encourage all of our listeners I want to challenge you to take a pledge, and that is to improve the soil health in your own life, whether it be on your farm, in your backyard vegetable garden, maybe in your patio container garden. Improving soil health. I invite you to take that pledge, and you can do so at the website forthesoil.org. That is the digit 4, thesoil.org. And gentlemen, just a minute or so left in the podcast today. Eric, one final question for you. Chris mentioned one of his favorite books on the topic of soil health. Eric Benfelt, do you have a favorite book on the topic of soil health?
It's very similar. It's a historical account of the Dust Bowl, and it's The Worst Hard Times by Timothy Egan. And I think I've mentioned this. It chronicles the lives of, I think it was 5 families that moved out to Oklahoma, the Panhandle of Texas, and just what they experienced during the Dust Bowl. And I also find that it's whenever I get down or slightly melancholy, that if I pick that book up, it reminds me that life was much harder another time ago, and also a reminder of just taking care of our natural resources and soil resource in particular.
Well, that's a great selection, and I'll have to read that book. I'll have to confess one of my own favorite books on the topic of soil health is by the great Wendell Berry. It's called The Long-Legged House. It doesn't sound like a book on soil health, and there's a lot of different topics in there, but definitely anytime you read Wendell Berry, you're going to read about soil health. Chris Lawrence, it has been a real pleasure to have you on the program today. Eric Benfeld, it's been a pleasure having both of you gentlemen on the program today.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
That concludes this episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. For the Soil, a Conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. If you have a specific question about soil health, contact your local extension office, your local USDA Service Center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was obtained through the Free Music Archive and is attributed to Jason Shaw. All rights reserved. For the Soil, a Conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.